it's too much work for an HR leader to continue taking on. And so under one roof, they can get a coach, they can get a comp expert, they can get an HR advisor, they can, whatever they need. It's really about how can we make their lives easier. So again, they can focus on what is critical in their role and in their business. And I know when I was in-house, I used to have consultants. It was the only way to get things done. And quite frankly, I wasn't the best at every single thing. None of us are. And so why not hire experts who are great at some of those things and let them showcase their skill set while really helping me at the end of the day?
Hema Crockett is an entrepreneur and author who believes that life is too short not to do what you love. After spending nearly 20 years as an HR executive working in both the public and private sectors, she launched Gig Talent, a modern talent collective helping organizations level up their culture, their leadership, and their talent by connecting vetted high-caliber HR consultants and leadership coaches with forward-thinking organizations seeking a competitive advantage. Hema has been published in numerous print and online publications, including Forbes and Thrive Global, and has co-authored 2 books, Designing Exceptional Organizational Cultures and The Everyday Leader. Hema, welcome to Voices of HR.
Gosh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Well, we are so excited to have you here because this gig talent thing is all the rage right now. I know you and I had a little exchange on social media this past week, so let's start here. So you decided after a 20-year incredible career in HR as an HR executive to strike out on your own because you saw the future of work. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wish I was as futuristic, I suppose, at the time as that made it out to seem. I was more so just tired. I was tired of the, internal politics. I was tired of working for just one company. I wanted to really bring that skill set that I had honed over the years to more companies. And it just so happened to be that it was at the cusp of really breaking through into the gig economy and that becoming a thing, quite frankly. More of a career, a professional career for people versus what people used to jump in and out of. Yeah. So that's really where it started for me. I just wanted to do something that was different. I wanted to be my own boss, which is why a lot of us leave in the first place. But more importantly, I wanted to do work that I loved to do. And so set myself up in such a way that I was able to do that. And that made that jump that much more exciting.
So most of your customers are HR leaders, actually, with not enough hours in the day, which is rampant within that job today, right? I mean, I have so much respect for anyone who's in HR today. It's such a tough job. So tell us a little bit about what are the most common things or reasons that an HR leader would come to you and seek support in this way?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It really is a lot of HR leaders that come to us, in addition to CEOs and CFOs. And I bring that up because it really depends on the size of the company. And so some of the smaller companies who haven't invested in an HR leader just yet are looking for just that. They're looking for an HR advisor to help them as they grow and scale. So sometimes it's really this broad category, right? We're talking about somebody who can help with how do we onboard? How do we do performance management? How do we help with compensation? How do you really just come in and create an HR department, quite frankly, as a company grows and scales? And then for those who have HR, whether it's a team or whether it's just an HR leader, we get called in to do so many different things. Our consultants are great with compensation. That tends to be a big one that we see. And sometimes that'll be pretty cyclical. So we'll see that right around the Q3, Q4 timeframe as we're going into performance management, end of the year. We'll see a lot of learning and development right around those summer months, so around Q2, Q3. So whether that's helping put together a full L&D framework, whether that's somebody to come in and really help facilitate different courses or different topics. And then we see a lot of coaching, actually. And that's one of those things that is quite frankly year round. We saw an uptick in that really happen during COVID, that and how to manage in remote teams. And it's been great to see that companies are really investing in coaching a lot more than they used to as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And, tons of calls coming in. There's, of course, there's all different types of coaches. And I know that you have a huge repository and portfolio of leadership coaches as well. So talk to us a little bit about how you source this talent, because if I was sitting back in that CHRO seat, and I was connected to someone like you or a company like yours, my first question would be, what type of talent are you actually sourcing? So tell us a little bit about the process that you go through.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll tell you a little about the process and why we ended up putting this process into place, which is really critical to how we've set the company up, to be fair. So what we do is we vet all of our leadership coaches and our HR consultants. And we only focus on those two verticals because, quite frankly, that's my background and my co-founder's background. So let's stay in an area that we breathe, that we live, that we speak, and understand the language that goes into it. That's really critical. But what we do is we require everybody to have a legal business entity, a federal tax ID. We require them to have a business license, as well as business insurance. So these are folks who are consultants, period, or coaches, period. They don't hop in and out of in-house work and consulting. This is the profession that they have chosen.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is these are also folks with, on average, about 12 years or more of experience. So they're coming in ready to hit the ground running. And that really is one of our differentiators, this vetting process. And that came about because when myself and Jamie, my co-founder, were in-house, we needed consultants. And it used to be, well, I have a friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend of a friend knows somebody. Do we really know what their skill set is? Do we really know where they've worked, what they've done? You're kind of just guessing, right? And so we wanted to take that out of it because we've lived it. And so by taking out that guesswork, these are folks who we put through third-party background checks. We do reference checks on. Our goal is to really understand, how do they communicate? How do they prioritize? How do they build relationships? How do they deliver on their commitments? And more importantly, how are they elevating the profession of consulting? Because the gig economy is huge and it's continuing to grow. And so for us, this vetting really is a differentiator because we want to make sure that we are presenting consultants who are amazing at their craft. And quite frankly, some of the coaches and consultants we have, they blow my mind every time that I get the opportunity to speak with them.
I think as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking there is no one better to vet someone in HR than an HR pro, right?
HR, 100%.
It's so true. It's like
you
they
don't want me talking about IT or marketing or any of those things. I assure you. Did you turn it on and off? That is the extent. But HR, I mean, we speak the language.
Yes.
Right? We get it.
Yes. And so you can see through things, I'm sure, that others absolutely can't. So as I was also listening to you talk, I thought, okay, there has to be a subgroup of our listeners sitting out there saying, okay, what if these people come in and show me up? What if they have this expertise or skills that just knocks the executive socks off and, they don't want me anymore. So tell me about that, because you alluded to the fact that these consultants want to be consultants for a reason. And sometimes when you do go into consult, you do get offers to stay, but you're saying that that isn't what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. It's not what they're looking for. And I think that really what they're trying to do at the end of the day is make sure that the HR leader looks great, that they have the support that they need to fulfill their obligations, to meet their objectives, to focus on those things that they need to be focused on.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're there to help as part of the team, not to take over the job. And you're absolutely right. I mean, some of our consultants, quite frankly, myself included, we've been asked if we wanted the full-time job. And I can tell you every single one of us has kindly bowed out in the most graceful way possible. Because the truth is, we made this leap. This is how we want to live. And we want to help as many HR leaders as possible. So there's definitely not a threat there, in my opinion. And kind of the cool thing about it too is when we do talk with these HR leaders, not only are we able to help them with some of their goals and objectives and get a coach in there or get a consultant in there to help the organization, but 3 to 5 years down the line, when these HR leaders are thinking, hey, I think I want to go into consulting. What can I do? We're there as a resource for them and can help them make that leap as well. So it's kind of both sides of that spectrum.
It is. It is. It benefits everyone. And, I'm obviously a huge fan of the gig economy. I'm a huge fan of bringing in expertise. I always have been, even when I sat in those roles, because they can always offer you a perspective that maybe you're not thinking about
100%.
as you're running 100 miles an hour trying to put the tires on a moving car, which is what HR feels like most of the time, right?
So more so these days, right?
It is. It is. The more I talk to them, the more reverence I have for HR. So you had I think it was an HR tech company, maybe, that I'm sure you have tons of examples that you can give us, but tell us about a situation where one of your HR consultants went in and helped an organization through a tough time.
Yeah, since you mentioned HR tech company, well, there's one that comes to mind that I think has been one of the really fun ones for our consultant to work on. It's a pretty well-known, significant Bay Area tech company. And they wanted a consultant to help with an HR transformation. And that included a few different things, right? That included helping the business start to think differently about talent. So who better to model it than HR and bring in somebody from the external world, the external gig economy. They wanted to really also elevate and evolve their HR team and the way the HR team thought too. And this is a global company. So making sure that all locations were on board was a really critical piece of this. And so what we did is we found a consultant who happened to be perfectly aligned for this role. And what was really beneficial to the company was the fact that she came in with experience. While she needed to get up to speed on the company, right? How the company culture worked, who the leaders were, some of those things where even as a new hire, you'd have to get up to speed. She already had all the tools she needed in her tool belt to make sure that they were great during this HR transformation. And I think those are the things that really help organizations when they think about external talent, is bringing somebody in who can hit the ground running, who has the experience, who has the knowledge, who brings that external lens that you were talking about. And that's exactly what she did for them. She was able to come in with her external lens. She rebuilt the HR business partner function. She was even able to take over as the interim leader. And to your question a few moments ago about what happens when, somebody is offered that job, she was offered that job. And instead of agreeing, she helped them find their perfect person. And so I think those things are really helpful as you're helping build out these HR teams and really bringing together the cohesion of somebody who's worked in global HR teams. Helping those learn who have never been in that environment before.
I'm wondering, I'm starting to get a lot of inquiries to help put proposals together to convince C-suites that the talent shift is occurring, that the gig economy is real, whether it's HR or other roles. How much convincing is your HR, the individuals who come to you from HR, how much convincing are they asking you to help them with their executive teams?
Yeah, I would say it's slim to none, which
Really?
if you can believe. Yeah, I think by the time they come to us, they've done one of two things. Either they have their leadership team on board with this is the route that we're going and this is, what we're going to do, or they're going to do and ask for forgiveness later. It's always one of two things.
Okay.
And I don't think we've run into a situation to date, knock on wood, where we haven't had an executive team on board. And I think a big piece of that is they also want to elevate their head of HR. They want to have that head of HR sit next to them in most meetings and in most things that are happening. And quite frankly, as you mentioned a few minutes ago as well, they can't, right? That HR leader has so much on their plate. How can they find time for some of the higher level strategy? So I think there's a little less convincing. I think sometimes there's a chance, right, that people take. And so the very first engagement tends to be, all right, we're going to take a chance. We're going to bring in a consultant maybe for a small project. We're going to get people on board with it before we expand the scope of that engagement. So we have seen that come up quite a bit.
And I love that strategy. I've used that strategy in the past because typically it's so difficult in today's environment to get a headcount.
It is.
Right?
Absolutely. And the fixed cost.
The fixed cost. And what if they don't work out? And what if we don't meet our growth projections, right? In this incredibly difficult economy. So you have that going. Plus, HR pros, please listen to me. If you want to elevate your strategic agility, you have to get out of the detail. And the best way that you can do that is to hire someone that you can trust to get that job done, to get the day-to-day execution done so that you can move on to more strategic initiatives sitting at the big table.
100%. And what better example to set for the rest of the organization, right? That you're willing to bring in external help during these types of engagements as well. And I also think there's a piece here, which is about, we've seen this for the last few years, and we've seen it, quite frankly, for 10 or 15 years prior, this cycle of talent, right? Where we build up our talent, we get a lot of employees in, and then we have to lay off, whether through internal or external forces. And then all of a sudden we start doing better. So let's ramp up again. And then in a year's time or 18 months, we're right back to where we started with a layoff. So we're constantly shifting and we're constantly in these patterns of higher layoff. By looking to external consultants, we can actually mitigate so much of that and create truly a solid strategy that has these 1099 consultants combined with W-2 employees, and quite frankly, combined with technology and AI as we move into what's coming.
Absolutely. So that makes my next question would be then, so I'm a CHRO, I'm a director of HR. I recognize that I need help. I want to elevate my game. I want to move into that strategic seat, which is absolutely necessary for HR. And I think C-suites are looking for it. How do you make sure that the consultant is the right pairing for that CHRO, that they're actually going to, I guess, personality wise, even fit together?
Yeah. 2 words, chemistry calls. For us, those are so important. So we say that we are really human touch, tech enabled. We will never let technology do all of the matching, all of the pairing, because there are so many things that technology could miss in those. Our sales team has the HR expertise. So when they're talking with these HR leaders, truly understanding what type of personality do you think would work here? Tell me about your CEO. Tell me about your maybe other HR team members. Tell me about whoever the audience would be, right, for this, whether it's a coach or a consultant. So we get as much information as possible. And what we do is our internal team actually hand matches. So we try to find 2 or 3 options who we think are great fits. Because for us, we want to make sure that our HR leaders or our CEOs or CFOs have options. That was one thing that we learned when we were in-house. Sometimes you get what you get and you hope it works. But if it doesn't work, you kind of start at square one and have lost perhaps months of work in that process. And so for us, this front end is really critical. So after some of this hand matching, we actually ask the consultant, are they interested? Are they available? Get some of their details, pass those details on to the decision maker at the client. along with their bios and resumes and things that would help really form this good picture. And then we say, don't pick. Have a chemistry call with maybe one or two of these consultants or coaches. See who you gel with. See, this is your chance to ask questions really on both sides, because for us, we want to make sure our consultants and coaches feel comfortable at the end of the day as well. Mm-hmm. And so those chemistry calls are critical to make sure that people get along, to make sure that they feel the HR leader feels that the skill set is aligned, that they're going to be good partners, because we're looking for really long-term relationships. Mm-hmm. That's really how we affect change. Somebody who can help and build trust quickly, not only with that HR leader, but anybody on their team, as well as the leadership team where necessary too.
That is, I love that chemistry fit, because it's so critical, especially for HR, right? And to have someone come in and support you, you have to be able to trust them, and there has to be alignment.
It's so true. And I think if you were going to hire somebody for your team, you would interview them. Mm-hmm. You're not just going to extend the offer and then interview them. True. So why should hiring a consultant be any different, right? You should be able to talk to somebody. You should be able to see if there's a fit, if there's alignment, and then extend that offer.
Yes. Yes. And the great news is, your whole HR team has done the heavy lifting. And so hopefully what they're going to get is, the top 1% that they have to choose from.
Exactly. These are curated.
Yes.
Right? And they're curated for a reason. It's people who have the industry experience, or perhaps that specific type of work experience. So again, it really helps, right? We can have these consultants jump right in. They can get in there, they can get the work started. And then we also handle a lot of the admin side of the work. Because for us, what's really critical is that the consultant and the HR leader or CFO, whoever the sponsor is on the client side, they're able to get to work as quickly as possible. And that's our goal, because again, it's about meeting their needs when they need somebody.
See, and another reason why I love this is because as a CHRO, having worked with consultants for years, and hiring them and now becoming one, there's some consultants that make a 2-week project into a 8-week project. And it would exhaust me, because I want you for 2 weeks. Can you get the 2 weeks of work done? And I feel really strongly about that, like to be upfront. This is how long it's going to take, and this is the price. By hiring someone through Gig Talent, that's what they're getting. If it's a 2-week project, you're getting a 2-week project. You're getting a person for 2 weeks, correct?
Correct. And that's part of that chemistry call. Right? That solidifying, that allowing the HR consultant to ask the questions, and then being honest to say, I know you want all of that done in 2 weeks, but here's what we're going to need in order to accomplish that. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a conversation. And I think that's really the value, right? Not only in those chemistry calls, but with consultants who know the work, who have sat in that seat before, who speak the same language. And I think that's really where the trust is starting to get built right out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And the other thing with our model is that sometimes work changes. That happens. We've all seen it. The scope changes.
Yes.
Something new creeps in. A new priority has come. The CEO has said, we're starting this over, whatever it is. We've all lived it.
Yeah.
And so what one of the things that differentiates our model as well is that really under one contract, an HR leader can tap into any of those experts. And I think that's really important, because when I was in-house, again, friend of a friend, right? Or a consultant may do all of that work, but they may not. And so now I have 17 different contracts, 17 different SOWs, all of these things to try and figure out. It's too much work for an HR leader to continue taking on.
Right.
And so under one roof, they can get a coach, they can get a comp expert, they can get an HR advisor, they can, whatever they need. It's really about how can we make their lives easier. So again, they can focus on what is critical in their role and in their business.
That has to be music to their ears, because far too often, whenever I talk to one, it's like there are never enough hours in the day, ever. Yeah.
Hey, and I know when I was in-house, I used to have consultants. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
the only way to get things done. And
Yes.
quite frankly, I wasn't the best at every single thing. None of us are.
No.
And so why not hire experts who are great at some of those things
Mm-hmm.
and let them showcase their skill set while really helping me at the end of the day?
Absolutely. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're the one who hired them and it's your team. It's your credit,
I'm
right?
accountable for them, good or bad, right? So I want
Yeah,
only the best.
absolutely. So you had, I think before when we had spoke, you had a situation, I think where one of your consultants went in and some of the companies that you're working with are looking for to maybe more equalize their pay. And we see that coming with legislation, right? I mean, I think it's already enacted in California and New York and maybe even New Jersey. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think that is going to become something that, if it's not already, it's going to become a priority on HR's list for 2024.
Absolutely. And we're headquartered in California. So that was
Mm,
something that hit pretty quickly
yeah.
on our side. But the one I think you're referring to is they're a startup in biotech and
Mm,
they had secured Series A. And so when they secured Series A funding, it was time to really right size and equalize pay. Because as we all know, in startup situations, it's some get this amount of money, some get more shares, whatever it may be, nothing is equal.
yeah.
And it certainly isn't based on role. And so one of the things that our consultant was able to do in this case was really step in and look at what the jobs were,
Mm,
work with the executive team, work with the comp committee to really figure out what was the pay philosophy going to be, building
mm,
it from the ground up because nothing existed. So before they were able to hire, probably about another 50 or so people, it was building this infrastructure in a way that made sense while educating the
mm,
executive team on why this was going to be important, how we look at pay, why it matters what somebody's role is and how many of that particular role you're going to hire. Understanding that you're almost at this phase of growing up that happens because prior to really Series A, it's a little all hands on deck. You all kind of do everything.
mhm,
There's no real solid job description. So our consultant was able to step in because of her deep knowledge on compensation, but also she was a rare breed because she had a broad knowledge of HR as well.
mm,
And so was able to really think about this is what you need to do short term and long term as you
mm,
start to scale the organization and really help them build a structure that they were able to grow into and grow with as time went on.
mm.
So it was an interesting project, I think, because of the way that the money had come in and they all of a sudden had funds where sometimes we run into the situation where our consultants may go in, they may right size compensation, and there's not enough money
Mhm.
internally to pay for some of those differences or discrepancies. This was not that, luckily.
Right, right. And didn't they also then help them with leadership, or it kind of evolved into something else? Because as we all know, HR has so many different facets to it, right? And obviously they got started and things were going well. Can you tell us like where they headed next?
Yeah, absolutely. And little history here, this company came on board with us March of 2020. So
Oh, wow.
just to give a little idea of what was going on at the time, with
Wow.
zero HR advisor on board and kind of what they were navigating. So they had secured Series A right before COVID hit.
Mm,
And so the initial was to have a consultant come in and really help with the compensation.
mm,
And then COVID happened. And slowly, our consultant was getting pulled into so many different facets. And like I said, luckily she was able to because she had really, I think in engineering, they call it the T shape, right? Where you have
mm,
this vertical that somebody's great at, but they also have all of this generalist knowledge too.
yeah.
And so she was able to step in and partner with the leadership team. So really attended a lot of the leadership team meetings.
Mm,
Prior to her getting there, they were never talking about people. They were not talking
mm,
about talent or leadership or anything that was critical to how you scale the organization. It was always research driven.
mm,
So she started to bring in some of these elements into every conversation.
mhm.
And then again, during COVID, because we're talking about how do you maintain a culture, especially in a biotech where some employees are necessary in the office, they're lab employees, they have to go in, and then we have remote employees. So really bringing this cadence to the table around town hall meetings, working with the CEO on what to say, what to present on, how to bring this culture together, doing a survey with the employees on, do the values still mean anything to you? So really starting from the ground level.
Wow.
Right? Soup to nuts on, do these values still, are they meaningful? Do you even know what the values are? Let's just start there.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Do you know what they are? And if you do they resonate for you? If not, what does resonate for you? Really building from the ground up. I mean, she eventually had to turn their CEO over as well, helped onboard a new CEO. And to the point that we started this conversation with, was not interested in that full-time position at the end of the day, and really helped set the organization on this great course with a solid foundation where she helped hire in a senior director of HR.
Wow.
And has maintained that relationship, luckily, because there's a knowledge transfer that needed to happen. And so it was really critical in getting that organization from where they were to really where they are today, which is about, 100, 150 employees. They started at 20 back in March of 2020.
So she really came in and created the foundation that they could grow, and then ended up creating a position for someone to get hired.
Yep. And what she did is she built the foundation in that relationship with the leaders by saying, you actually don't need a fixed headcount right now, when they were 20, when they were 30.
Right.
And as she helped them with their workforce planning, built in for where was the best time to start hiring and start really looking for what was next and the qualities that were important for that level of growth in that head of HR. And so it was just, it's a good partnership. And the thing that's really nice is these consultants have such a breadth of knowledge that they're able to kind of be agile and, duck and weave, if you will, because during especially 2020, we didn't know what was coming our way. Mm-hmm. And so able to really be agile with the needs of the organization as they were changing rather than getting so rigid into, this is what I was here to do. This is the only thing I'm going to do.
Yeah, the other thing I love about that story is that because she was a consultant, she didn't have to play the political games, right? She could only bring to the table what she thought was the right thing to do and what was going to benefit the organization.
Yeah, there's this Buddhist concept called non-attachment. And it's this idea that I care and I want to provide you with the best that I can, but the outcome is yours and the decision is yours. And when I first became a consultant before starting Gig Talent, that was a hard thing to learn because when you are in-house, that is your baby. Yeah. Everything that happens, you are accountable for. Then you move into this consulting role and it's very different. Yeah. And you don't have to play those political games. And you can say what you need to say because your paycheck isn't actually riding on this opportunity. Yes, you could lose money depending on, if you lose the engagement or not. But at the end of the day, you're trying to do what's best and you see the big picture or the whole picture. Where sometimes when you're in-house, you can only see what's right in front of you. Yes. And so that's the fun thing, right? And sometimes when I touch base with some of our consultants who are on these projects, they're cracking me up with some of the things that they're like, was I like this when I was in-house? I'm saying things differently from now on. And I think our HR leaders appreciate that because they have an advocate. They have somebody in their corner who is going to say the things that they want to say, but have to say in a very politically correct sort of way. Yeah. And here's somebody who's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why? Why do we do this? Yes. Have we ever thought about doing something differently? That's the fun piece. Those are the fun times. Isn't it? I mean, outside perspective is invaluable. Invaluable. Yeah. Especially really in HR. And I also think this outside perspective from people who have seen other industries as well. right? There's something about bringing in that knowledge specifically that is so helpful, because when you're in it day to day, you only see your industry.
Mm-hmm.
You see your company.
You
and
do.
Here's somebody talking about all these other adjacent industries or industries you never thought about. And you start to see these connections of how some of the problems are the same,
Mm-hmm.
or some of the solutions, how they could actually work across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And those stories are so important, I think, for people to understand and bringing in that depth of experience.
So when you think about the needs for HR in 2024, I know it's right around the corner. We're in fourth quarter. What do you think HR will be focused on, and how could a consultant help them?
Yeah, I don't think it's that different than what we have been focused on. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of it remains attraction and retention of really great talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right there is the answer, right? This external where consultants can come in and truly help has to do with, if you start building your team differently, where can we start looking at projects or tasks within a role where we may not need a fixed headcount, but we need somebody, and we need somebody with experience to help us. So I think attraction and retention will remain high up there. I think, how do we really integrate and deploy AI? I know we want to put it in this bucket of buzzwords, but truthfully, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's, how do we make sure that we keep the human element in things as well?
Mm-hmm.
I also think the one thing that we've worked on the last few years will continue to shift into 2024, and this is our employee value proposition. Especially as we really sit into, are we coming back to the office? Are we hybrid, or are we fully remote? That's really what a lot of this year has been about.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we ground further into our decisions as organizations, how do we revisit our employee value proposition? And there's so many pieces involved in that, whether it's rewards and recognition, whether it's compensation, benefits, learning and development. And those are all places where consultants can come in with their expertise and play, build something great, train the team, and either help deploy it, or if there's a team, help support that deployment along the way.
Absolutely. Well, we could continue this conversation, I think, for hours, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. And so I wanted to move into, we have something called rapid fire questions. So these are 1-sentence questions with 1-sentence answers so that our audience gets to know you a little bit better. Are you willing to play?
Yes, let's do this.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
What's the biggest challenge HR leaders are facing today?
Attracting the right talent and retaining the high performers.
What are bad recommendations you hear in HR being passed off as best practices?
Probably a lot, to be fair. Treating employees like family is probably number one on that list for me, combined with leading with compliance, combined with promoting people who are not ready to be promoted, but we needed a manager in the role.
Yeah. Those are all
Doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good. Yeah, they're bad.
It's bad that you were able to just rattle those off off the top of your head too. What advice?
See where we're called in sometimes.
I'm getting a sense. What advice would you give to someone just starting out in HR?
Ask the questions. All the questions. I think sometimes we get caught up in thinking they're stupid questions. There's no such thing when you're learning. That's how you learn.
When you get overwhelmed, how do you refocus?
I walk away. I love to meditate. So I'll meditate, I'll sit outside, just be in nature. But my biggest thing is I walk away, and that allows me to refocus and kind of come back to what I was doing and why I was doing it, more importantly.
If you could have your own billboard that would reach millions of people, what would your message be?
Ooh, rapid fire.
Yeah.
Trust the journey. And I think that applies to every relationship in our lives, and also just the ebb and flow of life in general.
Perfect. What's the main takeaway you would like to leave our listeners with today?
that HR consultants and leadership coaches are truly a great resource and are there to really help your team and you succeed. It's not to be scared of looking for external expertise.
They do not want your job. That's the key. That's the key, but they can help you. Where can people go to learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn under Hema Crockett and also our website, which is gogigtalent.com.
Today, we have been joined by Hema Crockett, co-founder of Gig Talent. Thank you again so much for joining me, Hema. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Berta. I loved our conversation.
I did too. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for watching. We would love it if you shared your thoughts on any of the topics we discussed in the comments below. And if you got value from the video, it would mean the world to us if you hit the like button and subscribe to the HRMorning channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Voices of HR.